Okay, so we give a little summary that's Negeya. The basic shalis of the Maimer is that he, without going to the Arichas, just in the Kudah, that the mezuzah and menorah, so the mezuzah, the halacha is in the right, finally it's machlekes about the menorah, and the menorah is on the left, and if there's no mezuzah, the menorah is on the right, which shows that they're connected. The shaila is, they're one thing really, but they're opposites. And likewise, the Maril says that you have the mezuzah on the right and the menorah on the left, and the person wearing tzitzis in the middle. So this is all one inyan. So the basic question is, how is plurality, division, one? Al derezeh, we find in the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, we find this contrast that the Torah, the pshat in the question is that the Torah doesn't simply say it should burn all night. It's one thing, but the Torah says me erev ad boker. So the Torah is dafka fusing the mitzvah is dafka embracing erev ad boker. They're opposites. Al derezeh, they have to bring the oil to Moishe. Moishe shushvina de malka. That's milamayla lamata. But who lights it is Aaron, who's shushvina de matrinusa, which is mayla lamata. I'm sorry, milamata lamayla. Again, opposites. So how do you explain all of this? So understand all of that. He, in Maimar of the Alter Rebbe, where the Alter Rebbe brings the Gemara that says Chabakuk came, Navi Chabakuk, vehemidon, and he established all the mitzvahs, Taryag mitzvahs, on one thing. Emunah, Shenemar, Betzadik b'Manaseh Yichya. The Alter Rebbe goes on to say, Behemshech lezeh, that Vayerev Vayivayiker, again, contrast, Erev and Boker, it's really one day. Ein Yom b'li Laila v'Yom. So he's bringing that to explain that the Rebbe is saying that the Rebbe behemshech to the quote from Habakkuk is bringing that Yom comprises of Erev and Boker to explain Habakkuk that it's Taryag mitzvahs, and yet somebody distills it to one nekuda, and we have to understand how this is possible. So Erev and Boker in Torah is, so what Alter Rebbe means to say is that Taryag is a breakdown really of two things. In other words, once you start with division, the rest follows. It's not something else. If there's already two, then there can be three, it can be a million. So the Taryag mitzvahs is the inyan of Erev Boker. Mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs leis aseh, but be'emes Chabakuk is megala that mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs leis aseh. That's where the division begins. That's where the binary system begins. Yes, no, chesed, gvura, express, withhold. So Chabakuk distills it to one inyan, tzadik b'Manaseh Yichya, to be explained. So he goes on to explain the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe quoting here. This is what Alter Rebbe's Maimer from that bichel that was just discovered or sent to the Rebbe, whatever the story is there, subsequently published. Tavkuf Samach Beis. I think it's a few books that the Rebbe is quoting from throughout this entire year, almost every Maimer, if not every Maimer. So the whole Bria is Erev and Boker. Went into Narichas that the person himself has katnus and gadlus. There's times of ashpola and there's times of gadlus amoichin. There's an avedis hatfila. There's a time of gadlus. His bonanus, the heart is opened. There's avedis hatfila, which is meridus and bitterness from his distance from Hashem. So we have this in the Bria reflected in the person who is a microcosm of the Bria. The shadish of that is in Malchus Datzilus. In Malchus Datzilus, which is the creative force, the word of Hashem that creates, in Malchus Datzilus is Rotze V'Shuv. This Malchus, as Malchus descends into creation, Vatit and Teref Levesa, Vatokam Ba'id Laila, Vatit and Teref Levesa, that's she is Malchus, Laila is creation. She descends into creation but it teref levesa to extract in tzutzik dusha, as explained elsewhere in Chassidus. That's the hashpala, that's the katnus of Malchus, and then there's the godless of Malchus, as Malchus stands in the Aliyah, uniting with Zoh and beyond. Now the shirish of that's also not the shirish. And then he goes on to say it's also reflected in all the three components that make up existence, Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. That it starts off with Nefesh. We see this in Nefesh, these two things, that life literally is expansion and contraction. L'cheir is talking about the expansion and contraction of both the lungs and the heart. L'cheir, based on what it says elsewhere in Chassidus, doesn't elaborate. Likewise, in space, in Olam, there's expansion and contraction. He doesn't spell it out either, but l'cheir means either thing is growing or it's diminishing. Nothing is static. And it can be both. Grow, diminish, a constant interplay of the two. Expansion, contraction, heat and cold. It's also part of it. When the thing is warm, it expands. When it's cold, it contracts. Physical things. And then there is in Shona, in time, as we said, Rotzav Yishuv. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we learned a very deep maim in the whole end of Zman, Moti v'le Moti, reaching, not reaching, how time evolves from dargis to physical time and change lamata. It's a very, very deep sugya in Chassidus, and it's one of the most challenging subjects in science to understand the nature of time. All kinds of theories. But the root of it all is in Torah. Torah called Mala'ilam, and Torah has Erev and Boker mitzvahs the same mitzvahs leisase. Then we began yesterday a big however, which is going to be explored here. A big, not the however is a distinction to way it is l'mayla, dinyan of Rotzav Yishuv, and these two tenuas, and the way it is lamata, and that is. So down here, you can't have both at the same time. Either it's a rotzoy or it's shuv. Either the person is in a state of godless or katnus. But l'mayla, it is at once and simultaneous. And that's what he's going to explain now. And therefore, this is all to lead us to an understanding that l'mayla, the yes and the no, the mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs lois aseh, which is the root of all, Teda kadma la'ilam, is all in yonam echad. And that's what Habakkuk is saying, Hamida malachas, this is all to explain that. So Isdal is where we're up to. We actually began it. I'm going to say by heart what we began learning so that we can continue going further. So understand this first by looking at the Kechapel Benifel, because that's a discussion at hand, is the consequence of sources that precede it. So he's going to explain the Kechapel Benifel, how it differs, l'mayla versus the way we affect change. Keicha peil benifal means the peil is the changer, the nifal is the change, the effect, the consequence. There's a difference the way we affect change, we're invested, and the way l'mayla does. The difference is when we're invested in doing something, we are invested, we're nitfas. So, for example, a person is involved in one activity, a physical activity, example, I was playing soccer. He cannot lift a heavy weight while he's kicking the ball. He's invested, he's nitvis, he's invested his energy in the regel. And a weight which you could normally lift, he can't at that moment. Afterwards, the koyach withdraws to the body, and then he was able to express it in lifting. Should he so choose. That's what we're up to. Now he's continuing the way it is lamata. So we're up to, it's the number 18, just about the number 18. Not only can, when he's doing one activity, because he's nitfus, he can't do another one, some more of, or kamaykin, or it's similar. It's one Indian. Kamaykin yeshin ben kain mapul l'shas apul. The person is different before the act as opposed to while engaged in the act. Sharei, but there's a principle. This is from the Meir Nevuchim. So in Meir Nevuchim, it's a whole arichas there, all kinds of hakdamas, all kinds of introductory observations about reality that apply lamata, don't apply lamaila, etc. It's classic Jewish philosophy. So one of the principles there is like etzem bilti mischalek. That's not there. That's in another place. But one of them is kol meniya misnu aneya. Anything which moves something else itself has to be in a state of movement. You can't will it. And it comes magically. And mind you, even if the person does will it and somehow it affects, there's a change in the seichel. The rotzen has been articulated. At any rate, we're talking about shebegashmius. Kamoi. Shebeshas aksiva, so a person's writing. Misnaneya ha'etzba, the finger moves. Can't produce the writing without the cause itself in a state of movement. That can be subtle. Make a little movement, press a button, a big thing happens. But there has to be a movement. You release something, and it can be a tremendous movement. But it has to come, the mover has to move. So that's the way it is all lamata. So he wants to bring out that lamata, the keichapel benifel, is invested and is affected and is changed as a result of that which we produce, the change that we produce. Clear? Posh. Not so lamaila, because in ishayach b'keichapel eliki, this is not at all applicable to the divine force, hanifolim b'nivroim, in creation, hanifolim imeno, which come into being as a result of the divine force. It's unchanged and uninvested, in essence, as the Bible will explain. Sharaniya violation is the pasuk declares, Hashem says, I have not changed, notwithstanding creation. Same as before, during and after. As he goes into there's no change in the Eibush and the creative force. In the creative force, never mind in Atzmos, obviously, but the creative force, as it goes on to say, I think it's going to identify 3 levels. Before creation or post-creation, not in that now God has revealed something that he hadn't before, and not in terms of movement. Okay, to be understood, these words will become clearer as he spells it out, Be'ez Hashem, clearer for us. Why is there no change? He posits the following. Number 1, well, this is the primary consideration. Fact. Lefi, why is there no change in the likus? And the violation is because because the whole bringing into being and the animation, the life force of creation, it's not the king himself engaged, it's merely his David's name. And as we see lamata, a name has no bearing on the person himself. It's just merely the means by which he is identified by something else. Or, in the case of the Melech, his name is, they bear his name. Behind the commercial, Melech Medinosa, like a king. Shekol Anshe Medina, all of the citizens, but all that's there, Nikroim Hashem Malchus Pliny, Canada, Australia. In those days was the king's name. There's no connection to them, even though they exist. So what's the whole connection? They bear it in his insignia, his name. His name is literally called upon them. That's the whole relationship. Now, without going to the Maimon doesn't go into it, so we won't. But it's going to mention that the incredible irony here is, or the paradox, that in the relationship of the citizens to the Melech, it's absolute and total. He literally owns them. They don't know him, he doesn't know them. In Keiches HaGiluyim, there's little or no interaction for the average citizen, none and never. And yet his whole Metzius is bound up with Malchus. He is a Canadian. But he's not bringing out that paradox. He's bringing out the way it is experientially. Experientially, he goes about his life. And what shaykhs does he have with the Melech? Shmoy Aleim. So let's parallel this to Lamaila. So likewise, in the Nimshal, the object of this Moshel, which is Malchus. Shazen Emad. Just occurs to me, it's fascinating. We don't find, I don't believe, could be wrong, we don't find by any other Midas Lamata that we say that it's the same way Lamaila, like we do about Malchus. Malchus the Ada, the Gemara says, is like Ke'en Malchus the Rekia. The only attribute that we say, the way it is down here, it is patently reflective of the way things are Lamaila. The other Midas are much more subtle. Person's Chesed and Gevuda and Seichel. Not as clear, not as obvious. The parallels are not so powerful. Okay, it's not our subject, so I'm not going to offer an explanation, but it is to be noted. Shazen Namba. So about this we say what? The Bishas Malchus we say Shemalchuscha. The Azeh goes not on the Marshal Nimshal. But just like a king's, just like a king's name is called on every aspect of the country, it all bears the insignia of the name, this identity. Likewise, Malchus Kol Elamim, that your sovereignty, so all of creation bears your name, is the Malchus of all of existence. Which means, as we're saying, that the whole union of Malchus is name alone. So that means, in calling his name or referring or calling his name upon them. Now, calling means to summon forth. By summoning forth his name, by applying his name, that's how God creates all of existence, by his name. He's Machaya Oisam Ma'aylit. What does it mean by his name? Meaning to say, the merest ha'ada sheba'ada, that's not reflective at all. No giveaway of anything of who the king is and what he's like. That is what Hashem employs to create. This is all to explain why there's no change. Because it's the most negligible possible relationship. His name, and a person doesn't need a name. It's for you to identify me or me to put a tag on you. You belong to this kingdom. That's it. It's a tag. So therefore, Leisha Nisya, let's, in the words of the Maimon. Right? What we're learning now is something familiar to all of us, right? You think about it every day in davening. It's a big part of davening. Umoshel zeh, now this moshel of what? Of a name, this is more accurate. It is more accurate, more accurate is the right word, but it's a more accurate, it conveys more of what you want to convey here now about the nature of creation than the moshel of light that comes from a boy. Now, why is he even bringing that? Because light is also bottled b'metzias to the moed. Push it. When you see something, what you have in terms of the sight of it is absolutely, it's not the thing itself. It's merely the light that reflects from it. And it's bottled b'metzias to the moed. The light can't exist unless the source is emanating it. It's dovuk, it's bottled, it has no identity other than to express the moed. Absolute bittul. And it's effortless. The moed, anything that exists naturally, will make its presence known, without, not by choice or effort. So it's completely bottled, the light that radiates from something. Says the Rebbe now that the moshel of a name is more accurate to convey the negligent and output of Elikus in order to create. Because Sharei Ha'ir v'ziv yesh le'ktzah shaychus el ha'moed. At the end of the day, the light and the rays have a connection to the moed. They are the expression of the moed. And as I said a moment ago, a moed must produce light. That's a pretty strong shaychus. Do you have to have a name? No. So a name is completely extraneous and negligible and non-expressive, much more non-expressive of that which it is named for than light emanating from the moed. Are we clear? Folks. In the words that continuing the Maimon, again, Mashenkin guf im shmoi, a body, an entity with a tag name, there's no connection, there's no comparison. In theory, it could be any name. You could decide to call anything, anything. And it doesn't need a name. And yet, so that's what the Eibush is telling us. That how does creation come into being? Now, so all of this, by the way, leads to the conclusion. What's the conclusion? That's how creation comes into being. Then what? Then the whole creation is what? It's absolute garnish, garnish. It's ein ve'efes. And that's what it is. When a yid does a mitzvah with this ein ve'efes, then it becomes everything. Because it's expressive of him. And dafka, because it is ein ve'efes, it is the keli, because of its absolute bittul to reveal the truth. You know what I'm saying now? Dafka, the higher, very deep, subtle point, friends. Dafka, the higher oilimus, which say something. Chesed, gevur, atzilus. They say something divine. They obscure atzmus. This world that says nothing. That's the keli for atzmus. Because it is nothing. And that's how our avodah is to reveal that it is nothing kishel atzma. Nothing other than the desire of God's will that it be, and that he expressed himself ultimately through it, through us. I told you this, a marshal, to express this. So a king's minister comes to your house, one of the king's ministers, worthy of his name. He's a brilliant man, whatever his portfolio is. And you talk to him and you engage him. So you're going to be impressed by him. Now, you know, he's only here because he's the king's minister, and that's his whole life's calling. But the Metzias is because of his talent and charisma and everything else about him, and intelligence and wealth of knowledge. He, when you talk to him, you don't think king. You don't think king. You're not engaged with the melech. Even though you know it comes from the king because of his own value. But what if the king sends a minister who is an absolute idiot savant, the absolute, he's garnished, he's an absolute no intelligence of every second. It's Melech. Well, the king pointed. He dafka expresses the Melech. He doesn't get in the way because he has absolutely zero value. And the less value he has, the less intelligent, the more he says he's the Melech. So that's why this world at the end, Elam has it, because of its Ein Ve'efes, dafka here is the great potential. That's the Yemesa Mashiach, which we're all working towards. And we have to live now, is that its whole Metzias is the Melech. Okay. Right, we'll stop here. And we'll stop by a period. Let's get a daven in a minute. So think about these words. Praise the Eibishter from heaven. And the water that's above the heavens. All of it. They all praise the name of the Eibishter. For he commanded and all came into existence. All was created. Hallelujah Hashem in the Oretz. Praise him from the earth. Hallelujah Hashem. Praise be the name of Hashem. V'hainu, what are we saying? Yeshakol protan livroim the shamayim. All of the details of creation, all of the aspects of creation of heaven, v'amayim eshemal shamayim, and the waters that is above the heaven, which we learned about, right? Yedua, as is known in brackets, shamayim. It doesn't give us any footnote here. All right.
Hey cholis, maybe.
Huh?
Hey cholis.
I'm sorry. Hey cholis abriya. Yeah. Well, that makes a difference now. Still no footnote. Hey shamayim, hey cholis. Shamayim are the chambers of creation. Hey cholis the briya. Let's see. What goes further? I'm sorry. Period. Bria. It means the heichal de be'elam bria. Shemayim goes on the heichal of elam heichalis of elam bria. It's Gan Eden Elyon. V'amayim asher meyala shemayim yipchinas mayim elyon mishemal rekia. And the waters above it. That's the waters above the rekia. Shebegan Eden Elyon, as we said, tainuk. The mayim is tainuk. So the water above elam bria. This is from Klol Yatzilus, that's the Tainuk Elyon. V'oretz ha'meichal is Dasiya. So Oretz is the lower worlds. Gan Eden Elyon is Mechal is Elam Abriya, yeah. And the Maitzir is Gan Eden HaTachton. So Oretz is a cholis of Asiya, and then comes in Bechinas Mayim Tachtenim, which we learned in the previous Maimorim. That's the Tanugim Gashmi. So the whole business. So he's saying this. These few psukim describe the whole gamut of creation. So the whole business, Kula Mekabli Mebechin Hashem Bilvad. They all come into existence from His name alone. She'inyan Midas Malchusi Yizborech. That's His sovereignty. Sheshmai Nikra Leim Kanal. Okay, we're not finished. Va'idzais will continue. We thought that was how negligible creation is, Lagabe, the creative force. No, the pasuk includes Kiniskav Shmai Levadai. Even the name is removed. Only Haydi al Rasushamayim. Okay, to be continued, Beis Hashem, on Monday.